tonight's meeting is very significant. Shoreline study and this shoreline levee. I had the chance to visit Katrina and so on and saw the devastation. We sure don't want to see it here. We want to make sure our future children have a better life. And just to understand that it may happen in 218 is so encouraging. Staff always prepares me with notes, and I just added it, so which I usually do. But I always thank staff what to do. They gave me a briefing over this, but I do want to take the time to mention the partnerships of the Sanitary Valley Water District, Army Corps of Engineers, State Coastal Conservancy, our landowner partners, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, of course, in the city of San Jose. Without that, we can't get these things done. And with your vote, we got over $20 million at the Safe Clean Stream measure called Measure B that passed some years ago. We all appreciate that, and Alviso got a good portion. This is about protecting our water treatment plant, because if that closes down, you close down Sanitary County. So we have an opportunity today to take your notes down. All these people here are working overtime and so on. You're going to take these notes, because here's the thing. We have a chance to build this together. Let's do it. It's very positive. It's going to help all of us with economics, flood insurances, and they help our homes in the way of life. So let's all chip in, be very positive, help staff do the job. Thank you for coming.
This slide shows the historic loss of wetlands around the bay. So one of the problems we're trying to fix is how do we bring back the ducks, the wildlife, the creatures, the wide navigable sloughs that used to be in the South Bay. And I don't need to tell people in Alviso about flooding. And although the Coyote Creek and the Guadalupe River projects have greatly reduced the flood risk in Alviso, there's still a risk from coastal, that is the bay, flooding, and that's one of the issues we're trying to address. And it's not just Alviso, it's many other businesses around the South Bay that are also facing the same situation. So with the acquisition of some of the salt ponds as part of the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project, it gave us an opportunity to look at the landscape and address some of these problems. I do want to say tonight I'm not going to talk about the South Bay Salt Ponds project. There's a lot of overlap between these two projects. There's overlap in staff, there's overlap in geography, agencies. But in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into that. John Bourgeois, our executive project manager, is here. If you have questions, you can ask him. You can ask me afterwards as well, if you want more detail. If you've never heard of that project, I'll try to explain it later. So, and I'm, to summarize 10 years of technical work, I'll just say there was a lot of it. And the conclusion we came to from the flood modeling and the economic analysis that Alviso area, we divided the shoreline up into little economic impact areas. Alviso was one of the highest priorities in terms of damages to address. So we focused in on Alviso and are looking at solutions in this area. So tonight I'm trying to, I hope I can give you some information that will help you tackle the very large document that is the EIR-EIS and the integrated document, which includes the shoreline plan. But I do want to caution you that although we are listening and we're doing our best to take notes, if you want to make a comment, please write it down and either on the comment cards or these email address or snail mail address, so it's an official comment and we can respond to it through the regular EIR process. So if you just say something to me, you know, I forget things these days, so please do write it down and send it in to one of these or hand the comment card to one of us. I also want to give you my quick cheater's guide to the document. Chapter 3 is the kind of overview, the alternatives analysis, how we got here. That's the best project description, so I would definitely check that chapter out. And then all of chapter 4 is what is typically in EIR, EIS. And then that's further divided into other sections. So, for example, chapter 4.6 is about aquatic resources. So if you're interested in fish, you go there. Chapter 4.7 is terrestrial resources, which in this case is mostly wetland resources. So the birds, the mice, discussion of fill. 4.11 is recreation, and 4.12 is visual aesthetics. And there's plenty more in there, but I'm just calling your attention to those chapters, which I think a lot of people will be particularly interested in. Yeah. So feel free.
This is a reference document, and you've got information on how to get the online version.
Yeah. So this is the project area, the Alviso area. And I did want to point out that there is a little bit of donut hole here in the middle. We did not forget those ponds. The reason they are not in the document and proposed for action inside the ponds, except for, of course, a levee potentially here, is these were part of phase 1 of the South Bay Salt Ponds Restoration Project. A17 has been converted to a tidal wetland already, and A16 is an open shallow water pond managed for shorebirds and other species that like shallow water. So that is not going to evolve into a tidal marsh, or at least it's not supposed to. So those two are not included in the shoreline study on purpose. So levee alignments. There are 4 levee alignments in the document. There's Alviso South that goes right next to the town. One on the railroad spur that's owned by the city of San Jose and was used by the plant to bring in supplies on the railroad. Alviso North on the existing berms, and on the city of San Jose's land, with the WPC land, there's
Water pollution control plan?
Yeah. Actually, I just caught it. I had flipped the letters around, so I was like, water control pollution? What? Anyway. So those are the 4 alignments you will see in the document. We did look at other alignments, and they did not make it into the final alternatives of the EIR. The regulatory agencies let us know that this alignment was very problematic going out into the ponds. And the other alignment through the sludge pond at the time we were coming up with our alternatives was not consistent with the city of San Jose's plan at that time. And we also had some concerns about what might be in the ponds. Alternatives 2 and 3, I also want to explain something that might confuse folks, are on the same alignment. The difference between them is 2 is a little bit shorter, 13.5 feet in the document, that's height, and with a small buffer area, what we're calling a bench. Alternative 3 is 15.2 feet high, and it has a much larger buffer upland transition zone that we're calling an ecotone. And I'll explain later why this is. But both alignments take Alviso out of the 100-year FEMA floodplain. Alternative 3 does it for longer in the face of sea level rise. That's the difference between the 2 numbers. Where the levee would cross the railroad bridge is there would be some sort of a swing gate that would automatically close when certain. This is where I have to turn to Rechelle Blank, my colleague from the Santa Clara Valley Water District, who has, I just want to acknowledge her, and Caleb Kahn, he'd come out, is over here, he's the project manager for the Corps. And so if you have technical questions about how this structure would work, you're going to have to talk to Rechelle. And if you have questions about next steps in the Corps planning process, I would suggest, or if you want to find the expert at the Corps who put together the flood modeling or that kind of thing, Caleb is the person to contact, and he can answer those questions or give you to the right person. And then where Artesian Slough crosses the levee, there would have to be, on this alignment, there would have to be a tight gate structure that would continue to allow flows in and out of Artesian Slough, and importantly, the plant's discharge to go out as it does now. And if, for the public access alignment, that could also have a bridge on top of it to allow public access. New Chicago Marsh is something that we really wrestled with in the planning process, and we had a lot of meetings with the Fish and Wildlife Service, who is also here, and I think you can see the brown uniforms if you have questions of them. Melissa is here, and Markhill, Melissa Amato and Markhill, so they're here as well, so if you have questions of them, please do ask. The thinking behind the New Chicago Marsh is if you're just looking at it solely from an environmental perspective, perhaps you would select to build a levee furthest inland, and then you want to allow as much restoration as you possibly could in this area. Now the problem with that is that New Chicago Marsh is very deeply subsided. So if you built the levee way back inland and then brought bay waters into New Chicago Marsh, you would flood it, and it would be a deep pond. Now, ponds are very valuable habitat. There's nothing wrong with ponds, but we have ponds. So this is pretty much the only marsh in the area, and it's endangered species habitat right now. So when you're weighing the trade-offs, would you want to flood your endangered species habitat and have it be a pond when we already have ponds. And it may never evolve into a tidal marsh because it's so deep, it's not going to get good tidal flows, so it'll probably just stay a pond. So that's something that we weighed, and we decided that probably the best use for New Chicago marsh is to keep it as is, maintain that habitat, and to protect it from sea level rise by putting it behind the levee. This is also, there are parts in chapter 4.7 where this is also discussed. So restoration. After we build a levee alignment, the next step would be to build an ecotone. Now, what on earth do I mean when I use this term, ecotone, or bench for that matter? Basically, ecotone is just a dirt slope. It's, the idea here is to bring back some of the historic features that would have existed in the landscape. So when there was a high tide or there was a big storm, creatures would have been able to go up inland, up into the hills, up into the grass, whatever was outside of the tidal areas, and find places to hide and take refuge until the storm passed. And now what we've done is we've put seawalls, riprap, parking lots right next to the tidal marsh. And if you go to Palo Alto Marsh at a high tide, you could just see, literally in the parking lot, animals sitting there, and then with the predators going overhead. So there's been a real consensus in the last 10 years amongst wetland scientists that there needs to be some upland refugia and complexity introduced into these tidal marshes. It's not just enough to restore the marsh. You gotta give them some uplands too. So the idea here is build some uplands, make sure it's vegetated, and you can have that kind of complexity for animals to take refuge in. Also in terms of sea level rise, as the waves get higher and the sea level goes up, the marshes are going to move up. And so if you want to keep your marshes, the bigger the better for ecotone, because then the marsh has more room to go up. So that's one of the reasons why we prefer to have the big ecotone. The bench in the EIR is just a very small buffer area that provides some of these functions, but a lot less. Now, the downside of the big ecotone is it's a lot of fill. Now, so here's some comparison charts I took from the numbers that are in the EIR. But do remember this is in a context of when we are done of restoring nearly 3,000 acres of tidal marsh. So there's a lot of fill, but there's a lot of wetland restoration as well. And the other thing, this will present a challenge for permitting. This is new to do this much fill. And even though it's for habitat purposes, we are working with the regulatory agencies and trying to make this work. But it is a challenging aspect of the project we'll have to deal with. So once the ecotone's built, the levees are built, we would then start with pond A18. And the reason we would start with pond A18 is the Fish and Wildlife Service has an ecosystem restoration mission. The Army Corps of Engineers has an ecosystem restoration mission. Because these two federal agencies have the same mission, the Corps cannot do ecosystem restoration on Fish and Wildlife Service lands. That's a federal rule about budgeting, and Caleb's going to explain that when you ask him that question, right? Are you ready for that one? Okay. So what this means is we can restore Pond A18 because that is owned by the the non-federal sponsor by the City of San Jose. So that does not mix the two agencies, the two federal agencies. So we would start with A18, that would be done through the Corps process. This does not mean that all the ponds to the left of Artesian Slough, which are owned by the Fish and Wildlife Service, would not be restored. They're still in the project, they're in the EIR, EIS, they will be covered by the permits, but it does mean right now the plan is that that would go through the Fish and Wildlife Service process. And whatever grant money from other agencies would help the Fish and Wildlife Service restore those ponds. So right now that is the plan. We do have language in the most recent Water Resources Development Act that says the Corps may construct ecosystem restoration projects on Fish and Wildlife Service land where the local sponsor has spent a lot of money on that land. That would be us. So that trick is the word may, and we're waiting for implementation guidance from Corps headquarters that interprets the word may. Does may mean yes, or does may mean no? We don't know yet. So if they come back and say, yeah, we're gonna build those the project on the Fish and Wildlife Service lands, then we would start with A12 because that's the deepest pond, and it would be good to start with that one, give it a chance to get the sediment in it, and then maybe do A18, and then work through the rest of the ponds in a phased manner. I do want to add, just because we have this problem with ecosystem restoration, that does not apply to building a levee. The Corps can build a levee on Fish and Wildlife Service land. That's different missions. They do not have mission overlap. It just applies to the ecosystem restoration aspects of the project. And I did say that ponds would be phased in. We wouldn't restore all of them all at once. We would, start with A12 or A18, move to the next pond, and in between we would monitor and evaluate following the adaptive management plan as it's done with the South Bay Salt Pond project. And that's the adaptive management plan is Appendix I. And it's the same people, a lot of the same people that wrote the South Bay Salt Pond adaptive management plan, and it would be coordinated with that. So we were trying to do it in a phased, thoughtful way, and then that, it is possible if things turn out badly, we would have to stop. Maybe not all the ponds are converted to tidal wetlands, but if everything goes well, this is what the landscape could look like 50 years in the future, and this is from Appendix C, I believe it is, the landscape modeling. This shows you what the land could look like under different sea level rise scenarios.
Could you describe that a little bit?
Oh, the darker the green, the higher the marsh. So, for example, this would be pickleweed. These would be higher cordgrass, starting to go into pickleweed, and this would be more cordgrass. Or is that? Yeah, cordgrass low, cordgrass high, pickleweed. No, I cannot. I don't know of Alviso well enough. But I will tell you, Alviso is here. So here's the marina. We're like here, right? Wait, where are we? Down here? Yeah, so this is Alviso. Here's New Chicago Marsh. I don't know the individual streets. I just drive my car around and kind of find things. I know where Maria Elena's is. Go to that.
The one that line is above Freckles Avenue, the ranch.
Because I live there.
Okay. I know whenever I see maps like this, I always look, where's my house? Yeah. So here's a simplified table with the alternatives from the EIR. And again, you're probably wondering, why do you have two alternatives on the same, going along the same line? What's that about? Let me explain. It is alternative 2, the shorter levee with the smaller bench, is the Corps' NET project. Which, what that means is the Corps process requires you to do a balancing act between the cost of building something with the benefit, meaning the damages that you prevent. And they do all this analysis to come up with the sweet spot or the best buy for the federal dollar. And the alternative 2, the cost of that alternative sets the amount of the Corps' contribution. So that's the purpose of alternative 2. Now, the Water District, right, so I think thinks that it might make sense if you're gonna mobilize all this equipment and have all these impacts to do it in a way that you don't have to go back in 10 years and do it some more. So they are proposing to do alternative 3, which builds the levee up a little higher.
Is this a public meeting or is this public?
If you have a question, I can clarify something, I'd be happy to answer.
Better destroy my view when I stand out in front of my view on Michigan and Spreckles and raising that levee up. Is that going to keep me from viewing the mountain, or is that going to raise it so high where I can't see the mountain?
If you look in chapter 4.11, there are some visual simulations. And I think one of them is on Spreckles. I don't know where it is in relation to your house.
So when we take the break into the stations, somebody can show you those pictures. You can go through them. Rechelle, I think, also was going to.
So you're like here, or are you all the way out here?
I'm all the way out.
You're here? Okay, this is pretty far away on this alignment. So you will see a taller levee, but from here, it's gonna be pretty far away. So it's hard for me to estimate how much that, would it block the view of the mountain? No. The Newbie Island landfill will probably do more about it. Yeah, so this is, I don't know, Rechelle, how much higher do you think? Is it 4 feet on top of the existing or 6 feet on top of the existing levees? About 5 feet taller. And that is discussed in the visuals and the aesthetics section, although we can talk about it in more detail.
Yeah, we can show you the pictures.
So the alternative 2 is the NED that sets the level of the core contribution. Alternative 3 is the locally preferred plan, a little bit higher levy, much bigger ecotone, because we think that's important for recovering endangered species and having a more complex habitat.
Brenda, real quick, if I can add, you're familiar with your Guadalupe River levees and the Coyote Creek levees? Those levees are 16-foot elevation. We're proposing a little lower than that, almost a foot lower. The ones that we want to protect against tidal flood is 15.2 feet. So we're looking at a relationship of height from your home. If you look to the Guadalupe River, it's Alviso Slough, as well as the Coyote Creek, we're tying into those levees, and the new levee would be a little lower than that, but higher than what you see out there today.
So I won't have no view as I walk up.
It could be diminished, but we do have the renderings.
Look out at the mountain, what you're saying is, my
Are you-
view will be diminished.
Only a little bit.
But I think I need to know what mountains you're talking about, on the East Hills? No, well, like I said,
So maybe we can look at the pictures and get your sense, and if it's a concern for you, please, we want to get your comments. Okay, so we can work. I just noticed a lot of people have come in, a lot of people are standing. There are more chairs here if people would like to sit down. There's coffee. And this might be just a good time just to see, are there any other clarifying questions about what you've heard so far?
It doesn't widen it that much. The question was, if the levee is higher, how much wider? And if I've calculated it correctly, it does not increase the width that much. I don't, did you know?
the approximate top width is 15, 16 feet.
Wow.
At the top.
Wow. Wow.
But, and at the bottom, it's about a 100-foot base.
Wow.
Okay, so we hear some different perspectives. There may be different perspectives in the room today, and we do want to make sure we hear from all of you. So, and any other questions at this point? Okay, great.
All right, so that's why there's 2 alignments, 2 different heights on the same alignment. One is locally preferred, it's more, so we'll talk about that in a second. So recreation, last but not least. This is the existing trail in the area. And as we restore the ponds on the Fish and Wildlife Service property, this loop trail would be interrupted, and it would have to be, actually I'm pointing on the wrong thing, this trail would be interrupted. So this would have to be brought back inland as we phase in restoration of those ponds. The trail would have to move back in. So there would be a reduction on this loop trail. But you will also, you would,
Can't ride your bike on that line anymore.
yeah.
Can't walk or ride your bike.
This trail would be broken. They would maybe only go out and back, or either out and back. Because as you put in 100-foot wide breaches to have tidal restoration, and you lower these levees to improve hydrologic connection, they won't be available for public trails anymore. However, you will also notice right now there are no existing trails through this area. And so what we propose to do is take advantage of the haul routes that are also discussed in the EIS, and use these improvements, or they're existing roads right now actually, and complete a bay trail connection on the plant lands that would go up over to the bridge, is it McCarthy Ranch Road or Dixon Landing Road? And then would connect people with the bay trail over here, and then that would allow this all the way over to the marina. So this would be a connection that doesn't exist right now. This would improve connectivity. And so while there would be a decrease in the end in the number of trail miles, there would be improved connections. And also we heard concerns a couple years ago about how people would use these trails. Would this become a high-speed bicycle commuter trail? So to kind of address that issue and keep the two uses a little bit separate, this will be gravel or dirt, top of levee. And this, we hope to make this connection down here and pave this, and this could be a more cyclist-focused trail for people who want to quickly get through the area. The project's not inexpensive. This is the cost. And the Fish and Wildlife Service ponds are separated out, as I mentioned, because right now we cannot work and do the restoration on those ponds, but it is included in the project.
Good evening. So I just want to talk briefly about, I'm not going to go too in depth here about the schedule, but what you see in front of you is essentially for this calendar year 2015, kind of the way forward and what we're looking at as far as some of the key milestones. As you know already, right now, the public release began on the 22nd of December, and it runs until the 2nd of February. So this is the period of time to give your contributions, to give your comments from right now until the 2nd of February. Now, this entire year, this whole process, the review process, is really an iterative process, and it involves a lot of coordination between the public, resource agencies, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And when I say U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, it's our district, the San Francisco district, but also our higher headquarters, the South Pacific Division, and then also the headquarters of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Washington, D.C. So a lot of coordination between all those entities. And the feedback that we receive, especially from the public and all stakeholders, will go into making revisions to this product, probably multiple revisions during this calendar year of 2015. And again, I won't bore you with the details of what each of these steps really means, but the bottom line is to understand that we're trying to make the process inclusive. We're trying to make the proper revisions so that our goal is, by the end of the year, by December, to have a product that is ready to present to Lieutenant General Bostic, who is the Chief of Engineers, the Commanding General of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So December of this year, we'll have a product to the General, and we want his endorsement, his signature on that product, so then that product can then be transmitted to Congress approximately 1 year from now, so January of 2016. During this year, we have a lot of involvement. We have direct involvement, we have direct ability to influence the quality of the product that makes it to General Bostic. Our district does. So we have a lot of involvement during this calendar year. Now, as we transition, though, once that product is blessed off on by Lieutenant General Bostic, it's transmitted to Congress, we no longer have really any control. So once that product makes it to Congress, the ball's in Congress's court, and we need Congress to do two things. We need them, one, to authorize the project, and then two, to provide the appropriations or the funding for the project. So that's the key thing to understand. By the end of this year, by the end of 2015, we want the product sent off to Congress, and then at that point, we really have no control. It's really on Congress to both authorize and give the proper funding, the proper appropriation for this project.
And how many meetings for the public, since it's going to be firm at that time? How many sessions will the public have a chance to contribute what their feeling is, besides what your rate on? How
Yes,
many
sir.
chances do we have to contribute?
I'm going to phone a friend here. I don't know offhand. Does anyone know how many further public meetings there will be?
We can have as many informational meetings that we need to go through workshops to discuss any detailed areas. This is your opportunity to comment on the document so that it's going through the proper process for us to actually get it included and documented in the process. Once it's authorized though, through design and continuing through design, we work still with the community and the local agencies to make sure that alignment, the location of the levee is the best fit. And that includes the local agencies, the City of San Jose, the Regional Water Treatment Plant, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife, as well as the resource agencies, because the resource agencies also have to bless this.
Now our goal is for construction to commence in the summer of 2017. But again, that's completely in the hands of Congress as far as the authorization and the appropriation. The goal, the mark on the wall will be the summer of 2017. And just for everyone's knowledge, you know, the San Francisco district, we cannot lobby on behalf of this project once it's in the hands of Congress. We're not allowed to. So we, again, as mentioned before, once it's in Congress's hands, we really have no influence. But obviously, all of you have the ability to engage your congressman and lobby and show your support, or if you don't support it, sure, tell not to, but it's up to you. We can lobby for it, but you can't. So that's just a key takeaway that I want to make sure everyone understands, is we can't influence the process. The Corps of Engineers can't influence the process once it is left the Chief of Engineers.
So we have a question in the back, young lady.
So one of the things that you mentioned is that you're working with local agencies. I would love to have you add the Santa Clara Unified School District into that local agency, since this is our school and it is affecting our students and our community here. So if you can please put that on your list of people to reach out to. And then additionally, one of the things that we can work together with is when you're having your public meetings is to reach out to us, since we have such a large community here, that we can work together with making sure that our parents here and the larger community knows that we're going to have a meeting, because we have people here, but there's so many students and parents and community members this is affecting. So I think we can be a little bit more efficient when we have these meetings.
Santa Clara USD, was that?
Santa Clara Unified School District, yes.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to see who else. We had one person here who had a comment or question. Who else do we have? I just wanted to, okay, great.
I just wanted to maybe ask the public participation question a little differently. Looking at your previous timeline, are there other points of public participation via public hearing or written comments? And I also want to know if this process is going to include the typical EIR response to comments in written form?
Yes, it is for the response to comments in written form. That's why we're requesting you actually submit it via snail mail, the email, or tonight on the form, so that we will pursue and follow up with you after. As far as other public hearing goes, it's the public hearing on this document. It's dependent on the responses we get and what we need to work through, whether follow-up public hearings would have to occur.
And the deadline for comments is February 2nd at 5 p.m. So we will work with you to get as much information as we can to you tonight, and then you've got that time, right? So we have one more question.
I want to finish also that there will be a
So the
final,
Jager from the Army Corps of Engineers. Go ahead.
there will be a final EIS EIR coming out as well. A chance to comment on that. That's in the schedule.
Great, okay, and then,
So you're stating final comments on this for February 2nd. So I think that we need to be a little bit more diligent in who we're reaching out to in the community, because what is it now, January 14th? And I think we need to really, if I'm here only by happenstance because I was going to another meeting as a representative from the Santa Clara Unified School District. So I think that we really need to reach out to these communities to make sure that we're reaching everyone, because I can assure you that my staff doesn't have an idea that this meeting was going on, since I'm the only one here.
yeah, we've done a lot of outreach to the neighboring cities. We did not specifically target the school district. I do hope we've got all of your contact information there, and if I can work with you afterwards, that'd be great. Other comments and questions?
If I may, real quick, I'd like to add that we did do snail mail out to 3,000 plus in the community of Alviso bounded by the project limits. In addition, an email went out to about 1,700 members who have participated in other collaborative meetings, past public meetings, as well as the South Bay Salt Pond project, and we've reached out to the agencies. So We're sorry we missed Santa Clara Unified School District, and we'll gladly have your information added to the list.
So we have 1 and then 2.
I apologize for my not knowing about this, and I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce myself. I'm Margie Matthews. I've just been appointed as city council member for the city of San Jose for Alviso and Berryessa yesterday. So I'm woefully not elected knowledge here, but I wanted to introduce myself. Alviso was I was a council member 20 years ago. Alviso and I had a big fan for the community center, I love Alviso, I can. But I don't know anything about this project, and I just have to ask, is the city of San Jose professional administration, planning, and public works involved with this, aware of this, and commenting on this? Okay, thank you. Then you're probably here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I do speak English. My mom doesn't. How many languages has this information been communicated to in brochures so that my mom and everyone else, because most of the people do not speak English, so I'm just curious as to how are you communicating this in different languages?
At the bottom of the flyer that went out by snail mail to the local addresses, there was a verbiage in there about translation if it was required, that we would provide it. And it was also written in Spanish. The languages that were on there.
So, go ahead.
My name is Marcus Mendoza. I'm a resident of Alviso. I think if we can elaborate a little bit about some of the rises in the marshland now of the water, and I know there were several concerns with the residents because we noticed more recently that the water has risen and it looks, I mean, it's higher. There's some properties on the State Street side that water has actually come onto the property. And so is that part of your guys' working with whoever, I don't know, officially, as far as controlling that level of water that is presently impacting the community? And I know your levee is further out, so is that stopping, is that going to ultimately stop that water, or that water will always be there and we have a risk of water impacting the community from that area?
I have to ask an actual answer. The short answer, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that this study addresses water coming from the bay. There also has to be, as part of it, an internal drainage study to look at how to get water out of Alviso that comes in from rainfall. And that would involve things that Rechelle knows a lot more about than me.
Actually, I'm going to have our official wildlife representative tonight talk about that because they do manage New Chicago Marsh.
So the water levels are high in New Chicago Marsh, and we've actually been working with the city of San Jose to address that. This last rain event, multiple rain event that we had in December, we actually had a lot of water coming off of city of San Jose properties from the north into New Chicago Marsh, and Alviso was having some issues of flooding, and we worked with the city of San Jose to address the pumping capacity both in New Chicago Marsh as well as the city's pumping station. So it's something we need to address, but that was the rainfall event and not tidal events coming in.
In addition, I want to add that the city's storm drain system is not designed to handle conditions generally above a 10-year storm event. And what that means is if you get a significant deluge of rain coming in, the storm drain pipes fill up with capacity, and unless you have sufficient pump stations to pump that out against the water going through the rivers, into the rivers or into New Chicago Marsh, which may be full of water, it needs to find another place. There's a pond, and unfortunately that is the surface streets. And in Alviso, because
That's very unfortunate, because you know what, we live here, you don't.
I want to add that.
We just came from a meeting that said that it was not 5 years, and it was not 10 years, and it was not 5.
It's 2 years. I'm not done. If you would let me please complete my statement. What I wanted to say is because of Alviso and the subsidence history and the elevation as low as it is, the capacity is not 10 years. It's actually a lot less, 2 to 3 year storm drain system capacity. So it's kind of even less, and you're going to see the street ponding occur more rapidly for much smaller rain events.
And then took it out.
So are you guys working with the city of San Jose as far as requiring them to improve the system? Because if they don't improve the system, it goes out to the marsh.
Yeah, so we have someone from our water district, Norma Camacho, or
And many of you have participated in the 6 o'clock meeting. The city of San Jose just rolled out a potential plan to address the drainage issue by looking at a new pump configuration, and they've put $9 million of their capital budget aside to look for a solution to that problem. We're working very closely with the city of San Jose as they develop that project, and the city of San Jose is also going to be working very closely with this community on how to roll out this project as well. And I know that that is going to be a subject and topic that's going to continue to come back to the Alviso Collaborative as they move forward to solve the internal drainage issue.
I have a question. We've been dry and haven't had much rain, I understand that, in the past. We had 2 storms that went through here, and we started flooding.
Yes.
We had no way to pump it out. And now you're here telling us, and I know you were at the 6 o'clock meeting too, but you're here now telling us that, well, we're trying to deal with this. We have $9 million set aside to try to deal with this problem. Well, you know, we've never had a problem before with this. Why all of a sudden are we having this problem now?
well, I'm going to try and explain this in a term or in a way that during droughts, your ground is dried up quite a bit. And this is, I'm not explaining that this is the only reason, I'm just trying to explain that the ground dries up quite a bit. So when you get a large deluge of rain, the ground can't readily soak it up. If you had gotten that rain steadily over and over and over, your ground would be able to absorb some of that. And there is a difference. You have a harder surface that the water's going to more quickly run off and run into your storm drain system or into the
Okay, I understand that, but they took a pump out of here that we had already had in here.
So
why?
that
No,
is-
wait a minute. Why did they take that pump out of here? You know that we are below sea level for one. Okay, you know this, right?
Yes.
Yes, you know that.
Yeah, you get 13
Why
feet
in the
seconds.
world would you take a pump out of here that we already had here? Why would you do that?
So we are the Santa Clara Valley Water District, and that is the city of San Jose. We do work closely with them, but I'm gonna let Norma, because she has.
So who's the city of San Jose? I'm talking to the wrong person.
Yeah, and I know that we're going to have a lot more discussions on the internal drainage issues as the city moves forward, but I'd like for us to look at the flooding issue that we're trying to address in this particular project as well, because those are two different issues. I know that we're going to have to address both of those issues, because unless we...
How can it be two separate issues when
No, they are...
rain, it's gonna come in here and flood us from there?
Yeah, I understand that, but if we could look at this project as one of the issues, and I know that we have to look at both internal drainage and the external drainage issues, and solving both of those issues are the solution to Alviso's problem. And then right now, let's take it into chunks and at least look at this issue first and provide our comments to the Corps of Engineers so they could proceed forward with this project. And we will work with the San Jose City and the community to work on part 2, which is the internal drainage issue.
So how much more land does the marsh, the bird sanctuary, want from us? Because to me, it seems like every year that goes by, they're getting a little more land and a little more land.
The land is all owned on the left side of Vertation Slough, is already owned by the Fish and Wildlife Service.
But I'm saying, you know, you guys, we've always been known as the stepchildren of San Jose. Okay, when we flooded in the 80s, we walked in, me and my neighbor here, we walked through those floodwaters together. Okay, to get to our homes. Because the city of San Jose didn't even know where the damn floodgates were. Okay, and I know that personally, because they took my father out so that he could show them where they were.
And that's why we're trying to address
Okay.
and protect the city
But you know
from coastal
what?
flooding.
You take a pump away from us? You take a pump away from us. That's not, to me, that's not helping us. And all you're doing here is talking. We need action. We're supposed to have a storm this next week. What are we gonna do then? I like the smile. It's a nice grin, but you know what? We're not Willow Glen. I don't see Willow Glen flooding. You see Lincoln Street flooding? Hell no, you don't. But we're gonna flood. And you know what? My son's gonna be out there again, and he's gonna have his pump, and he's gonna pump that water down that sewer drain. Because that's the only way to get it out right now. Because are you gonna be putting another pump in for us? To replace the one you took out? Let's hear about that.
Yeah, why don't you and I talk?
No, that's not you and I, because you know what? These people that are here, they're here for a reason.
Yeah, but I want to update you on the plans that the city of San Jose has for the new pump station. And that's going to really alleviate some of the issues that you're bringing up right here. And so,
Does anybody else want to know about that?
Yeah, I know.
Well, you know what, maybe there's something where there are a lot of different folks in this room with different issues that are of interest to them. So maybe we can have a group go over to the side to talk about this stormwater issue. And then the folks who are interested in these other issues can go and gather in those areas. How's that sound? So that you guys can get information and have that conversation.
Can we also put some emphasis on the smell out here? I mean, there isn't much construction going on now, and it smells terrible all day long. And I've lived out here since 1961, and I've had to deal with those smells pretty often going out the
You're
back
having a
road.
lot of concerns about the
So
smells.
once you start taking that stuff up out there, it's gonna get worse, and it might even affect, like the lady said, some of our kids here in school.
So what I'd like you to do, sir, that comment form, if you can fill out your concerns that the construction may increase the smells and the other issues, we'd like to hear about that in writing so that then people will read that and hear that message. Thank you.